eyes, face, ears, and mouth. I first experienced a hybrid meeting 25 years ago. Most of the different types of hybrid meetings that I will talk about today, I've done one way, shape, or form. So there's a little bit of a school of hard knocks aspect to this talk. So let's consider speakers and members of the audience. We have eyes, mouth, face, ears, right? When we're communicating on video, however, how are we represented in remote locations? Cameras replace the eyes. Microphone replaces the ear. Sound emitting device, or PA systems, or loudspeakers, or mains, or drivers, or audio monitor. I choose the acronym SED for sound emitting device because I want to use the word speaker for the person speaking. Kind of deficiency in the English language here. And then remotely, your face shows up on some sort of monitor. Might be an LCD projector, but I'll just use the word monitor for consistency. So I have three fundamental points, and then I'll come back and go through these in more detail. Point one, so plan the two-way communication. When you're setting up for any sort of video hybrid meeting, you have to think through the eyes, the face, the ears, the mouth, for each location in each room. And in particular, if you've got a room that's got a set aside speaking area, which most of us had before COVID-19, you have to think about both the audience and the speaking area. This means that Toastmaster meetings can be more complicated to plan for than TV or monitor or webinars, where you don't have both interaction in all directions and the fact that in a given meeting, basically anyone, anywhere can be a speaker. And you've got to plan for that. Point two is, as you're changing from speaker to speaker, which of those devices has to change and who's going to do it? Think, for example, that we like to, in a single room meeting, we want to bring the speaker to the front. We do a handshake to hand off. But we have to think ahead of time how we're going to change. Are we going to shift equipment? Are we going to move equipment? Are we going to use software to make changes? And point three, plan, test, implement, test, adjust, test. The key word here is test. Each room, each time you add or change equipment, something needs to go wrong, it seems. So you got to test and retest and test, test, test. So ears. Depending on what you're doing, you may need one or two microphones. You have to have sometimes a microphone on your speakers and sometimes on the audience. You have to have sound emitting devices appropriate for your room. Now here's the bad news. When you have a location with distinct speaking and audience locations, which most of us had before COVID-19, as you get better at this, I have convinced myself you really need two cameras, two monitors, and two microphones. And one set in each direction. One set's connecting the local speaker to the remote audience, the other the opposite, the local audience to remote speakers. Again, something like a webinar, the second category doesn't matter. Now let's forget video for a second. Why does eye contact work when you're talking to people across a room, across a table? Why does eye contact work? Well, it's because the eyes are in the face. We are naturally drawn towards someone's face. where, thanks to nature, we have the eyes. So when you're looking at the face, you're looking at a person's eyes, and so they know that you're looking at them. That's eye contact. In the video world, that means that the camera and the monitor need to be as close together as possible. Now, I'll show you some examples later on. So I will now walk through fairly quickly, but this will be recorded, 6 different arrangements. And I have lived in one way, shape, or form the first 5. The 6th is kind of for future work. A basic Zoom meeting is what I call the first one, tables, and then we'll get further down. And the equipment you need as you have a more and more sophisticated room, the amount of equipment, the setting up of the equipment, the running the equipment during the meeting tends to increase. And you can see the various icons down there. So what I call the basic arrangement, 1 or 2 people at a computer. You need a webcam, computer monitor, microphone, and some sort of sound emitting device. The user shifts between speaker and gallery view as you go from a local speaker to a remote speaker. Typically, when you're watching somebody else speak, and therefore you have a remote speaker, you want to put Zoom or the equivalent software in speaker view. But if you're the speaker, you probably want to see your audience. So you shift into gallery view. Again, that's point 2, is what is changing and who makes the change as you go from one arrangement to another, one speaker to another. Here's my setup in my computer room. I have a webcam. I don't know if you can see the cursor in PowerPoint here, but the cursor is right in front, the camera is right in front of my main monitor. And I've got light shining on my face from this device so that I'm not in shadow. And then I've got the computer's speakers. And here's a close-up. So here's my Logitech QuickCam on a stalk in front of my main monitor, so that when I'm looking at your images, I'm also looking straight at the camera. Second configuration, what I call a table. You have a bunch of people sitting around a table, and at one end of a table, you've got a computer monitor, could be a laptop, could be something on the wall. You want it as large as possible, and if you have 1 or 2 people that are connecting in remotely, this works really fine if you're sitting around a conference. Again, the person controlling the software has to shift back and forth between speaker and gallery view. When I worked with and was a member of the club in Ogden, I was a club coach. Sometimes I would drive down there, but generally I was represented by a computer monitor and a single camera. And that works again for a relatively small size meeting. It does mean that if the person speaking is remote, everybody in the room has to look in that direction instead of looking at the speaking location or however you're arranging speakers. So for some circumstances, this works fine. From here on, I will be talking about configurations where the audience stays in one location, which is most meeting rooms. And so you've got a speaking location in front of the room. Well, that immediately means you need to put as large a monitor as possible up in front of the room. And if you have the whole thing controlled by a laptop, which is what generally happens, in this case, the laptop is only for control. You've got a monitor on the wall or wherever. There's a flaw in this particular configuration, and that is, as I've drawn this diagram, when the speaker is up in front of the room, the speaker can't see the remote audience. If you show the remote audience on that large monitor, then what does the speaker do? The speaker very naturally turns around away from your in-place audience and looks up at the big monitor. Well, that kind of breaks eye contact with the people who are there in the same room with you. There is a simple but not necessarily obvious fix, and that is to turn the laptop. Now the laptop is facing toward the speaker in the room. It means whoever's controlling the laptop now has to move back and forth, because you have to face the laptop when you're fiddling with it, turn around to face people who are speaking locally. This is now full function. Local speakers can see remote audiences. Remote speakers can see the audience in this room. And you accomplish that by turning the camera either toward the audience or toward the speaker. And whoever's controlling the software has to shift back and forth between speaker view and gallery view, which means the speaker has to, the Zoom master has to be moving back and forth, but that's not too hard. This is typically what we do in the Jaxi High Club. Well, we can add more equipment naturally, because more equipment means more toys. Now you have a fixed audience with two sets of devices. I've added another camera. That means I've got one camera pointing at the speaker, one camera pointing at the audience, and depending on where the speakers are, where the audience are, now the person controlling the software has to pick from one camera or the other. You probably end up adding another microphone. So now you have two microphones, two cameras, and two monitors. One monitor is the laptop, the other one is typically on the wall. Jaxi High sometimes does this, depends on who is setting up the equipment. It means you do have to be constantly shifting between one set of equipment or the other. I've so far been doing this when I do it in Zoom, but the OBS Studio is another option for shifting back and forth. Let me reemphasize the need to practice, because I might call this a two-monitor setup and a two-microphone setup, but if you think through this, Zoom actually thinks there are 5 microphones, because each camera has a built-in microphone. The laptop has a built-in microphone. So when you go to Zoom and say, I want the speaker's microphone versus a conference room microphone, Zoom will give you 5 things to pick among. And I have found that this gets me a little confusing, because what Zoom calls each of those devices is not necessarily what I tend to call them. So this works, but you need practice. It also takes more time to set up. This is Jaxi High, looking from the speaking area to the audience. You can see a laptop there, which happens to have DJ on the screen. And it's very difficult to see, but there's a webcam to the left of the laptop looking at me, and I'm in the speaking location. This is the monitor on the wall. You can see there is a webcam underneath the monitor on the wall. So it's looking at the audience. This is the laptop that's looking in the other direction, and this is the Logitech camera that's looking at the speaking location. It works, but it takes longer to set up and a little more complicated to control. Subtleties. One of the many reasons why you test and retest. Here are two different webcams. The Logitech QuickCam for notebooks camera comes with a 1-foot stock, so it works great here at home to put that webcam up in front of my monitor. But it doesn't have a standard tripod connection. So if you want to put it on a tripod, you got to test whether there is some way that this camera will attach to whatever tripod you're trying to use. Now the 922 has a standard tripod mount. So selfie sticks or other things that have turned into tripods work fine, and it has a better autofocus. But if you put a bulky thing in front of your monitor, then you can't see. So little tiny things like what connects to what, you got to test. And sometimes surprises occur. This is my basement. Here I'm looking at an audience. This is, of course, Terry. There's a laptop. There is a 922 looking at me and my LCD projector. And this is what the audience sees. So there's another camera here. Look, this one's looking at the audience. And this is an SEA meeting in gallery view. So you can see a variety of people that we all recognize projected up on the screen. So it works in both directions. What I call the Olympic case, which I'm not aware of any Toastmaster Club doing, but I'm building slowly the pieces that would allow this. Now you need really two large monitors, because instead of in here having an itty bitty tiny view of the remote audience, well, you'd like to have something larger in the back so you can actually see your remote audience. And to avoid having all kinds of equipment coming into one computer, if you've got the bandwidth, have a second laptop or even a tablet, and then you've got two connections into Zoom with two computers, two monitors. But I believe this actually is simpler, because now one computer with its equipment is set up always in gallery view. The other with its equipment is always set up in speaker view. Essentially, you have, by adding more equipment, you have simplified how the meeting gets run. I haven't tested all this, but so far, as I'm building toward this capability, I think it might work. One thing about webcams is that you can only control them by software. If you connect a webcam directly to your computer, directly to Zoom, Zoom overrides it, and you can find that whatever you want, Zoom will put it on the widest angle possible. If you want to change that, if you want to restrict down, put the camera in the back of the room and only have the stage area in your view, then you must outsmart Zoom. And there's two ways to do that. One is to have software in between the camera and Zoom, such as OBS Studio. The other way to outsmart Zoom is to have a real high quality camera that has an HDMI output. Then you have to have a physical capture adapter device that takes the HDMI output of the camera, converts it to the USB format so that your computer can accept it as input. So there's some ways, but you do have to work to outsmart Zoom. In conclusion, you have to plan for two-way communication. Camera, monitor, microphone, sound emitting device for every location in every room. And over time, that's going to drive hybrid meetings toward two cameras, two monitors, and two microphones. If you want eye contact, you've got to put a given set of camera and monitor as close together as possible. Think through how you're going to change from speaker to speaker, what equipment has to move, but software has to be reset and test, test, and test. I think this is the future. I've been doing hybrid meetings on and off for 25 years. Never before has there been so many different options and equipment that we can all own. My first hybrid meeting, it took a professional in Paris and a professional in San Diego to make it happen. But now it's within the reach of people who are willing to experiment, screw up, and experiment again. Mr. Toastmaster. I'll entertain questions, I guess.
Thank you, Steve.
I have a question. The INL uses Teams. We can't use Zoom. Do you know if any of this stuff works with Teams?
I have heard that it matters greatly whether you have Teams Professional or Teams Free. I have only used Teams Free, and I think it can do some of this, some of what Zoom can do, but I do not know if it overrides a webcam the way that Zoom does.
Okay.
I found it very frustrating. Scott and I have both tried to find ways so that I can put, see, when Zoom overrides a webcam, it means the webcam has to be at a single place to get the speaking area in your view. You can't fiddle with it. It's set by the maximum angle of the webcam. Well, I'd like to put the camera in the back. That avoids weird depth of field issues and so forth. I don't know, Microsoft Teams might be nicer to controlling a webcam that way. I simply don't know.
Okay.
Maybe
Guess
somebody
we're
else
gonna have to
does.
try it if we ever get back to work.
My understanding, Bev, is with the OBS Studio software as your virtual camera, you can feed any camera into Teams as well, just like you could. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. Is you can tell Teams what your camera is, just like you can with Zoom.
I'd have
So
to
you
see
can
if we
feed
can
in your
put-
virtual camera if you use OBS Studio. I don't know. My work, we use Teams as well, and my experience with Teams and video cameras is limited because not very many people use them. And I've only seen gallery view, so I don't even know if it'll jump into a speaker view or not.
You have to pin them.
Okay, so yeah, I hadn't experimented with that, so I don't know. But if you can, you know, then some of the same things that you do with Zoom, we could do with Teams.
I'll have to see if we can install OBS on our computers.
So if you have a real video camera instead of a webcam, this is a, I don't know, 10, 15-year-old Canon. And I have wondered until recently, how in the world, this is a better camera than a webcam. Why can't I use it? Well, this outputs HDMI. My laptop and my desktop doesn't take HDMI input. Well, we now have, I think this cost me $90. This is a Pango, and the details are in a handout I will send out. So this takes HDMI, converts it to USB, goes right into the laptop. And now, because I can zoom this or telephoto however I want, Zoom can't override me. And as an extra bonus, this provides another recording. Even if Zoom screws up completely, or whatever software you're using, I still have a recording. So when I am doing an important talk downstairs or any place else that I go to, I will now use that camera and put it in the back of the room where cameras belong so that they're not intrusive. But you've got to have that one little adapter card to convert HDMI to USB.
Is your converter working flawlessly right now? The
Every time
HDMI
I've used it, I have to remember that the camera, this camera, and I think most cameras of this type, can output either 1080 progressive or 1080 interlaced. This card only works with progressive. So you have to make sure the HDMI output is the right one. As long as you do that, so far it's worked, and there's no time delay that I can detect when I've tested it.
every camera, HDMI camera, has a small delay, but it's small. I think my Panasonic has a 4-frame delay. It's not that bad, but I have to adjust the audio to keep it in sync. But I really like using the HDMI output because the lenses are better, the sensors are better, and I don't need as much light to get a good picture.
Yeah, with a webcam, whether it's at Jaxie High or Rise and Shine or my basement, because the webcam has to be so close to the speaker, you get really weird depth of field effects. And so, like downstairs, the allowable speaking area is a trapezoid. The closer you get to the camera, the less you can move left and right because of the angle. You have a camera like this, you put it in back, now you can act normal and move, test it all ahead of time, and you've got a full stage to work with. Whereas if you're using a webcam, webcams were never designed to really broadcast a speaker standing up in front of an audience. A webcam is designed for what we're all doing here, which is just in front of your computer monitor. So if you're going to have a real room with a real audience and you want to send the speaker image off to an audience, you need a camera that was designed for that situation. And that means probably an HDMI output camera.
I'm running manual lens on mine, so I don't have automatic exposure, automatic white balance, or focus. So I can, if I put my hand up here, you can clearly see it's going out of focus because I don't have a lot of depth of field. I prefer that because it's not flashing when I jump up in front of the screen. You can see me go out of focus, but that seems more natural than the camera jerking back and forth trying to catch the focus.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Scott.
Oh, just testing. The other thing about the webcams is that same distortion you get between front and back. You'll notice how big my hand is as I move it towards the camera. And that's a wide angle lens again, decompressing the video.
Yep.
Most portraits are actually zoomed slightly, which compresses people's faces, and that's what they get used to seeing in a picture is a slightly compressed face. So your nose doesn't look as big, and some of the other features, front and back features, are more compressed because of the zoom, optical zoom. So when you get a wide angle camera, it does the opposite. It actually accentuates the front and back. So noses are even bigger than in real life, and things like that, you know. So, and the closer you get to the camera, the more that accentuates. As you can see when I move my hand in, there's a lot of difference. You know, if we were face to face and I did this, my hand would not appear so much bigger than my face to you. But because of the wide angle zoom, it does that. It elongates front and back.
Yep.